Hey guys, I thought I'd share some insight to how I set up my ABL organization. We're in the off season, so there are some things to consider and to make some decisions on. I'm going to use Minnesota here since they're going to be contracted anyway. Sad to see the Berserkers go, one of the original names of the teams way back in 2012 when Alex had them. First thing I do, and I've already done most of this since I've been exporting them for them in the past little while, but I sort all the players on each level of the organization by potential as shown, including my active and also my 40-man roster. The reason I do that is I always kind of remember the top players, and it helps me keep an eye on who's improving and not, and then I can quickly bounce back at the bottom and see if any of the bottom players have changed as well as the year progresses. The next thing I've done, which has already been handled, is anywhere there's been a recommendation in terms of these green arrows, either up or the red arrows down. For the off season, I moved them to where they should be to see if anything changes during the monthly scouting reports. And then if I have to make some tough decisions later on to free up roster spots, I'll go based on the stats of what they did previous year. But this just kind of helps put everybody where they should be to start. So if you take a look at the AA team, all the arrows have been pretty much cleared. The other thing is I take everybody off the DL and I just put them where they should be for now. And if we look at the A team, again, all the arrows have been cleared. And then in AAA, I've got a few arrows, but I'm not going to be adding to my active roster until Rule 5. So I avoid those. And then there's one player. We all have one of these players where you put him to AA, the arrow goes up. You leave them in AAA, the arrow goes down. So I just leave them at the highest level, and no problem there. Next, the other thing I'd like to do is on the international complex, since we're going to have a rookie league, winter league, I've already moved up some of the better players that are pretty close to being called up anyway. That happens when they reach 20. I switch my screen. I've created one specifically for international complex, and then I sort again by potential, and you can see most of the higher potential people have already been moved off. Manny Cortez, starting pitcher, he may also get a promotion here if I was still running them, but at this point I've moved probably 5 to 10 people to AAA in this area here, and you can see there's, if I sort by age, there's a whole bunch of good players that have been moved up, like Daniel Cruz, etc. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to show you is how I set up my rotation. Again, this is just personal preference, just to give you an idea. Again, I have a custom field here for pitching, covering the columns I like to see for my pitchers. The one I usually focus a lot on is whip. Then I go to sorting the stats based on last year's results, and then I sort by the whip here, lowest to highest, lower being better, obviously. The next thing I do is just take a look at the rotation to see if everything's been set up based on the quality of the stats of my starter. I don't really look at the stars here. I look at stats. That to me is the best indication of what they're doing. So first I've got Bowen here. He's got the lowest whip, so I'll move him into the first role. Takuchi, number 2, which is there already. Crespo for number 3, and then Kobayashi, the former Maple superstar spec, who was involved in the Pettit deal. He'll be 4, and then Hera, who's the worst of the whips, 174, would be 5th. Now in the regular season, when I see a flame like this, meaning he's on a hot streak, I may move up Kobayashi to possibly the third spot, maybe even put him first. The next thing I look at is the bullpen, using the same methodology. Whip, I see Tan is by far the best whip on the team for the staff. He's got 40 saves, good save percentage, great stuff. So those are all ideal for a closer. So I leave him there. Secondary role, I always put them as setup. And then the next pitcher is Song. So Song would be definitely a candidate for a setup role. I see his stamina is pretty high, so always worth taking a look to see if he's got 3 pitches and what the recommendation here is on projected roll. It says bullpen, so I'll leave him there. No offense, Song, but you'll be better as a reliever for us. So I put him as setup. Secondary role closer is fine. The next player is Curtis Cahill. Pretty decent stuff, etc. Very good whip, very minimum innings pitch, but we'll put him as the second setup man starting in the 7th inning, and we switch his role, secondary role, to middle relief because we don't need 2 backups for closer. The next thing I usually do, especially when I don't have a lot of pitchers, I'd look at middle relief. Next guy is Quezada. He's got a 1.30 whip, which is pretty average, a little bit above average for the ABL. I'd put him as the first middle reliever, normal for now, and then he'd be my first secondary role setup for my middle relievers. The next one would be Chavez. Again, whip here is more average. Decent amount of innings pitched, not great stuff, very low on the stamina, but nevertheless he's my best option there. I put middle release, normal, and then I would likely put that for long relief for secondary role. Even though he has a low stamina, I'd leave that for now. And then Ochoa would be the next guy, and he's last one left, and he's got the same whip, so I could flip-flop these two, but I'll just leave it the way it is for now and put him as long relief, normal, and then his secondary role, middle. And then I basically just click lineups and then back to pitching in order to resort this area. And that's how my layout would be. I'd actually prefer to have, as I mentioned, Chavez and Ochoa to have a little bit more endurance. So for that reason alone, it might be worth, I gotta put the stats back from last year here, sometimes it does that. It might be worth having Juan in that long relief role, but we'll leave it the way it is now. Anyway, that gives you an idea of what I do for setting up the rotation. Then I do look at pitch counts. When I see whips 1-2-2, 1-2-6, and 1-3-7, I would say these first 2 are definitely for 100. This one here I may go 90. Crespo, Kobayashi, since he's on a hot streak, I would just leave that at 90. And then Hara with the high whip, I'd leave him more for a shorter outing, maybe 80 pitches. And then for my relievers, I would just right click, set game strategy. I always override team strategy. I'll explain that here shortly. And then for reliever, he's fairly decent, so actually excellent with a whip below 1. I'd leave him in there until he basically burns out. He's got a below average stamina, but I would put him for at least 20 pitches, and then I would force his role to be used as a closer only. So that would be that. And then I go back to pitching, resort by this, and then the next person would be Song. Set game strategy, override team strategy, and Song, he has his 90 pitches, which is a little crazy. He's got high stamina. He's a setup man. I'd probably put him at 25. Pretty decent whip, so I'd probably go a little halfway here, and then force his role to reliever. Let's see, just stay on this screen, get back the stats here, all pictures. And then and you can see when I force the roll, you get these little indicators here. I like to do that for my pitching. And then you have Curtis Cahill, so I can just kind of drag him here. That's another way of doing it instead of clicking on him. Again, override team strategy. Cahill, similar whip as the other guy, so I'd put him around there. A little bit less endurance, but I'd still put 25. I'd put reliever. Fortunately, it keeps flipping the screens back and forth, which is fine. Just do that. And then we have Elias Bowen. We've already set the pitch count. Forces roll to starter. And then for starter, going back here to get the stats back. Bowen, he's got the best whip of the group. Probably go a little slower for him for a hook. And then Takuchi, very similar whip. Put him there. 100, as we said, starting pitcher. Override. And then we go back here. We go regular season, scope. Okay, there I did it. Then I got Juan. He's a middle reliever, if I remember correctly. He's got a pretty average thing in terms of whip, so maybe not as slow as the other guys, but a little bit better than average. He's got a decent stamina, so I'd probably put 25 there. I'd force his roll to reliever. And then again, getting the stats to basically show up again. Crespo, he's the other starting pitcher. 137 whip. Probably him. I would probably leave that as average for pulling. Starting pitcher. Go back to the screen here. Chavez, the other mid reliever. Not very high stamina, as you can see. And I'd leave him like that, and probably leave that as 20. Relief. And again, back so I can see the screen. Ocha, the same. Override. 20. Relief. Back to the screen. And then Kobayashi. Override. Leave him. He's on a little bit of hot streak, so I may bump him up to pull him a little slower than normal. And then the last pitcher is Hara, who is the worst of the bunch in terms of whip. I've got a low pitch count for him. I'd force him to starting pitcher. Here I may do a little bit quicker of a hook. And then override team strategies. Now I'll go back to the pitching screen, and everybody has a role here. Everything's been set up, and that's how I would do the rotation. I'll do batting lineups in a future episode. If you like what you've seen, let me know and I can do more of these. Thanks.